Freedom was an Englishman's right, and wherever he went, he took that right with him.
Hey there. A couple weeks back, in my review of PragerU's video on the British Empire, I pointed out that while the Empire certainly talked about freedom a lot, what they were interested in was freedom for the British, not anybody else. Today, we will illustrate this point in detail by covering a desperate fight for Egyptian freedom that took place almost 140 years ago. In today's video, we're going to be covering 40 years of rapid development and a complex Egypt-wide revolution. And we're going to try to do it in around 10 minutes, which is ridiculous. To prepare for this video, I read a 300-page book, and I think it could easily have been 3 times as long. So I encourage you to do your own research. Your interpretation of the facts could be different from the story of the Egyptian revolution that I'm going to lay out in this video. But let's get started. How English freedoms crushed Egypt. In our last video, we talked about Muhammad Ali, a figure I have mixed feelings about. He was an extraordinarily competent reformer who almost managed to build an independent, unified Middle East a full century before the more fractured, independent countries of today emerged. But he was also an imperialist and a conqueror. The guy was Muslim, but he was an Albanian from Greece, not somebody who was from Egypt. I couldn't find an academic source I completely trusted on this, but the rumor is that in 40 years of running Egypt, Muhammad Ali never bothered to learn how to speak Arabic fluently. In 1840, when Britain forced Muhammad Ali to give up the Middle East superstate he had created and submit to the Sultan, the consolation prize was that his dynasty would be able to continue to rule Egypt as the Ottoman viceroy. This was a bad deal for Egypt. Ibrahim Pasha, Ali's most impressive son, predeceased him. The 4 mostly independent Egyptian leaders after Muhammad Ali had all of his greed but none of his genius. Renewed submission to the Sultan meant that Ottoman treaties with Britain now applied to Egypt as well. This was the end of Muhammad Ali's experiment with protected manufacturing. 1838's very unequal Treaty of Balta Liman required that all Ottoman monopolies be disbanded and that British merchants have complete economic freedom in all Ottoman domains. Egypt's infant manufacturing industry quickly evaporated in the face of foreign competition. In the 19th century, the United States, Japan, and Germany all became economic superpowers by mixing relative openness on some trade goods with heavy protection for favored domestic manufacturing industries. The Treaty of Balta Liman shut down this avenue to prosperity for the Egyptians. Instead, the Egyptian people got to try radical openness and complete integration with the world market under British ideas of free trade. If this was going to work for any non-white country in the 1800s, it was going to work for Egypt, a country that got 2 incredible economic windfalls at mid-century: the Suez Canal and the U.S. Civil War. So let's see how complete reliance on foreign bankers and foreign manufacturers worked out for them. The Suez Canal was initially a French and Egyptian project opposed by the British, which is ironic when you consider how things ended up working out. The canal dramatically shortened the amount of time it took to ship goods from Asia to Europe. In the 19th century, it provided Britain's quickest access to India, and in the 20th, it controlled everybody's access to Middle Eastern oil. Muhammad Ali's successors could see the power and wealth that the canal would generate, but first they had to build it. Said and Ismael, the 2 rulers who oversaw this process, managed to find a way to build the Suez Canal that imposed maximum costs on the Egyptian people and ensured that the Egyptian people got none of the benefits. Egypt took on $68 million of high-interest debt between 1862 and 1872 for the canal and other purposes, yet they only received $46 million. The rest of the money went to fees for bankers in Europe. But these extraordinarily bad deals didn't look important at the time, thanks to Abraham Lincoln. During the U.S. Civil War, he blockaded the southern ports, starving the world's textile factories. Egypt experienced an extraordinary cotton boom. Some of Ismael's descendants want him to be remembered as Ismael the Magnificent. I think Ismael the Absurd, or Extravagant, or maybe Ismael the Disastrous would be more on point. Instead of using this windfall to finish the canal or maybe buy out some of the foreign interest in it, Ismael used it for the dramatic expansion of everything: the army, infrastructure, education, imperial adventures in Sudan and Ethiopia, his own extravagant lifestyle, and most importantly, foreign debt to pay for it all. Before we get to the disaster that you can all see coming, I think it's worth focusing on some of the good that was done. Ismael was desperate to portray himself as a modern, enlightened ruler, and the infrastructure and the vastly expanded government bureaucracy he created led to an explosion of culture and literature. Newspapers proliferated in Turkish and other European languages, but in Arabic as well. This period probably represents the birth of modern Egyptian society and public opinion, which ended up being a big problem for Ismael. In a lot of ways, Muhammad Ali was a foreign interloper, but few in the still largely pre-literate society he oversaw had the tools to challenge that, and he was pretty good at crushing those who did. Muhammad Ali could also point to his real skill at fighting back European influence to build legitimacy with the Muslim majority. His grandson Ismael was both in charge of a foreign dynasty and working closely with foreign infidels. This gave him a serious public opinion problem. In 1866, in an effort to build legitimacy and look more like a constitutional monarch, Ismael established a toothless chamber of deputies to advise him. Unfortunately, 1866 was also the year when U.S. cotton came rampaging back onto the market, tanking prices worldwide. Predictably, Ismael opted to keep the party going with debt. After all, the canal was almost finished. Surely everything would work out just fine. It didn't work out. Between 1866 and 1876, the walls slowly began to close in as the money ran out. Ismael's extravagance continued, but the beneficiaries became a smaller and smaller Ottoman Turkish and Circassian circle around him. Indigenous Egyptian bureaucrats and military officers found themselves shut out of the party, while the village leadership and peasants they were descended from were required to pay for the party through brutal taxes. More and more of the government budget went to pay for interest on foreign loans. The canal, which opened in 1869, didn't make enough of a difference. By 1875, Ismael was desperate. The greatest asset he still had was Egypt's shares in the ownership of the Suez Canal, that engineering marvel that thousands of his countrymen had died to produce. Egypt sold the shares to the British government at a knockdown price, cementing a British interest in his country that would take 3/4 of a century to chase out. That didn't save Ismael either. As is often the case with these things, a stupid war was the last straw. Egypt's failed attempt to take Eritrea from Ethiopia led to a declaration of bankruptcy. At this point, Egypt needed foreign funding to continue to function, so Britain and France established a debt commission that took over much of the Egyptian economy. 1876 also saw the institution of mixed tribunals in Egypt that not only allowed Europeans to be governed by their own law, but also forced foreign law on any Egyptians that did business with Europeans or owed them money. The Ottomans might have been expected to object to this, but within a year they were fighting their own losing war against Russia. Though Egypt technically belonged to the Ottomans until 1914, this was just a polite fiction. Meaningful control of Egypt, which the British had so ostentatiously handed back to the Sultan in 1840, was stripped away in 1876, never to return. The situation in Egypt became intolerable. The foreign creditors required that services be slashed and taxes be jacked up even further. For many Egyptians, this meant losing their land to Europeans in European courts on Egyptian soil. Ismael the Absurd, far too late, attempted to rebel against the Europeans, who quickly replaced him with his son Tewfik. The situation was intolerable, and the British Navy was a constant threat. But all was not lost. A real alternative to the foreign dynasty and the foreign banks finally emerged. Ahmad Urabi, a native Egyptian officer, led a revolt against Tewfik. He demanded an end to foreign influence and unjust taxation and required that the Chamber of Deputies be given control of the budget. In 1882, Urabi and the parliament gained control of much of the country, forcing Tewfik to retreat to coastal Alexandria and the protection of the British Navy. This, finally, was a real fight for Egyptian freedom. This was exactly the same sort of battle between greedy absolutism and a more representative parliament that had been fought in the English Civil War and the French Revolution. So did the freedom-loving British Empire jump in to protect this new birth of liberty? Hell no. They crushed it mercilessly and reinstated the tyrant so a bunch of European bankers could get paid. With the approval of their puppet ruler Tewfik, the British bombarded Alexandria in July of 1882, killing at least hundreds but possibly thousands of people. They invaded, crushed Urabi's rebellion, and sent him into exile. The British troops that came in the fall of 1882 did not leave until the 1950s. This is what the British Empire's freedom meant for the rest of the world. The English businessman was free to do as he wanted, and the Egyptian people were free to suffer the consequences. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. With this video, we've gone about as far with Egypt as we can go without talking about Israel and Palestine. Longtime viewers know that I'm reluctant to do that. I just feel like I haven't done the necessary reading yet. So when this Avoiding the British Empire series returns, we're probably going to turn south and start talking about Sudan. There's some good news, though, for those of you who really want me to talk about Israel. I've just established a new $2 tier on my crowdfunding thing. Those of you who donate $2 or more for each video will have the opportunity to vote, probably by the end of the year, on what my next big British Empire-sized project will be. Israel-Palestine will definitely be one of the options. So if you really want me to talk about Israel, you can click on the Patreon link here and sign up for the opportunity to force me to do that. Thanks.